All too often, the same design style is used around the world when we're building or expanding our cities and towns. Because of that, everything begins to look the same. Sometimes, it's great to take a break from all that bland similarity and treat your eyes to something unique and wonderful. Whether made by nature or nurtured by human hands, these are some of the most visually amazing places on Earth. It's hard to sum up in words exactly what Larung Gar in Sichuan, China actually is. On one hand, it's a town, all tightly packed together on a hillside with houses that seem to grow out of one another like a living organism. On the other hand, it's the largest single religious institution in the world. Larung Gar is of enormous importance to followers of Buddhism. There are believed to be more than 40,000 nuns and monks living in this multicolored maze. It sprung up in a short space of time. The valley was totally uninhabited until 1980, when Lama Jigme Phuntsok oversaw the creation of the first homes there. It's also cut off from the world. By order of the Chinese government, communication equipment, including the ownership of televisions, is illegal in the area. Tragically, it's under threat. The Chinese government is attempting to force Tibetan residents to leave the area by demolishing their homes, while at the same time allowing the migration of the Han Chinese people into the area. If spiders make you feel uneasy, you might want to look away for this part of the video. When severe flooding hit Pakistan in 2010, it caused enormous disruption to over 20 million human beings. It wasn't just humans who had to flee their homes, though. Every living creature had to get out of the way of the water. That meant the country's spiders taking to the trees. The floods took a long time to subside, so the spiders decided to turn the trees into their permanent homes. That meant encasing them in enormous spider webs, growing and growing until they enveloped the whole tree the spiders were living in. Sites like this are now common, cocooned trees, which each play host to thousands of spiders. The webbing is so thick in places that it's like a fishing net. The landscape has now taken on an appearance which is more like the surface of an alien planet. Some of the world's most incredible sights aren't to be found on the surface. They're far below it instead. Take the astonishing Carlsbad Caverns in New Mexico, for example. They were completely unexplored and unknown until an adventurous 16-year-old boy climbed down into them in 1898. Armed with nothing more than a homemade torch and some string to prevent himself from getting lost in the dark, he'd been attracted to the entrance to the caverns when he saw what he thought was a black tornado in the middle of the desert. But it wasn't a tornado. It was thousands of bats flying around the aperture. Forget Bruce Wayne, this is the real bat cave. As well as its bat population, it also has a stunning set of stalagmites, stalactites, and natural dams. Within Carlsbad is the Hall of Giants, a cavern 4,000 feet long and 350 feet high. These days, the caves attract thousands of visitors a year, although they're still considered to be dangerous to untrained explorers. At first glance, you'd assume that the Caojiawan subway station in Chongqing, China is abandoned and unused. It might be unused, but it's not abandoned. This station is still operating, it's just a very lonely transport hub. There's a reason some of the people who live here call this the Far Away Station. It's been open since 2015, but there never seemed to be a convincing commercial reason to build a subway here. And there still doesn't now. It doesn't even seem to be finished. Of the 3 exits to the station, only one is open to passengers. The other 2 exits literally lead to nothing. You'll find staff working inside the station every day, but it's rare that they have more than a few passengers to assist. Apparently, in years to come, roads and residential areas will be built close to the station, and it will then become a major metro point connecting the suburbs and the city center. We're no planning experts, but perhaps they should have built the homes and the rest of the infrastructure before they built the station. The Diamond Head crater in Hawaii has a quite opulent name for a location that doesn't have any diamonds in it. Its title comes from a case of mistaken identity by British sailors. As they sailed past it during the 19th century, they caught a distant glimpse of the calcite crystals on the beach and thought they were diamonds. Imagine their disappointment when they came for a closer look. The reality of the crater is that it's a volcanic tuff cone. The Hawaiian natives call it leahai, which roughly translates as tuna ridge. To them, the ridges of the crater look like the dorsal fin of a tuna fish. Diamond Head is part of a chain of volcanic formations known as the Honolulu Volcano Series, which also includes Cocoa Head and Punch Bowl Crater. In geological terms, it's still a baby. The Ko'olo mountain range, which surrounds it, is approximately 2.5 million years old. Diamond Head is a much more youthful 500,000. The rugged landscape of rural Scotland lends itself well to the tales of the supernatural and dark folklore. And Finich Glen is one of the great examples of that, because of the combination of a strange rock formation and the blood-red water which runs beneath and around it. Some people call this the Devil's Pulpit. They say that the odd, mushroom-shaped rock is where Satan himself stood to address his disciples as the blood of his enemies swirled around his feet. There are legends of druids holding secret meetings here in the privacy of the gorge, and witches performing human sacrifices using the rock as an executioner's block. Naturally, there's a less fantastical explanation as to why the water has such a seemingly grim tone. It's flowing over a bed of red sandstone. The logical explanation doesn't stop people from speculating about the true nature of this place, though. Those who climb down the Devil's Steps to access it say it gives them an eerie feeling. The Harajuku neighborhood in Tokyo, Japan is awash with anime themes, bright colors, and childhood dreams come to life. Nowhere is that more evident than at the Kawaii Monster Cafe, which was designed by Sebastian Masuda. If looking at these images of the cafe makes you a little uneasy, it's supposed to. Masuda's vision for the Monster Cafe is a children's cartoon distorted by 21st century nightmares. To put it in more simple terms, it's a bit like a nightmarish alternative to a Disney cafe. Not everyone can even stay inside the cafe for long enough to eat or drink anything. The combination of bright colors, flashing lights, and constant noise is simply too much for the senses and drives people back out of the door before they find a table. That door, by the way, is the mouth of a monster, and right behind it is a swirling merry-go-round packed with oversized versions of common candy snacks, including cupcakes and gummy bears. If that doesn't freak you out, perhaps looking up and seeing unicorn heads drinking milk from the chandeliers will. Just outside Saulė in Lithuania is a site that might once have been an ancient hill fort. What it used to be is unimportant. Here and now, it's home to more than 100,000 Christian crosses, made out of every form imaginable. The official history of the Hill of Crosses is sketchy, but the tradition of planting crosses here is believed to have begun as long ago as the 14th century. Back then, Lithuania was occupied by the Roman Empire, but craved independence. The erection of the crosses was a statement of defiance. There weren't so many crosses back then, though. Even as recently as 1895, there were only 150. As crosses began to appear in memory of those who fought against Russian control of the land, the number increases. By 1940, there were 400. The Hill of Crosses once again became a symbol of defiance against occupation from 1944 until 1991. Lithuania was under Soviet control and didn't like it. The Soviets bulldozed the crosses 3 times. Each time, more appeared to replace those which had been lost. Pope John Paul II visited after independence in 1993 and officially designated the hill as a holy site. We're increasingly aware of the environmental impact our lives have on the planet, and the Museo Subacuático de Arte de Cancun is an art installation that's part museum and part ecology project. As the name literally says, this is a museum of underwater art, accessible either from Cancun or Isla Mujeres. As well as a stunning series of sculptures, it's also an artificial coral reef, intended to repair some of the damage that's been done to the ecosystem in the area. Tourists are welcome to either scuba dive to the bottom for a closer look or glide over the top in a glass-bottom boat. The statues have been deliberately shaped like humans or tools of human existence, for example, cars, to highlight the effect that human beings are having on the planet. Those who do visit this unusual museum will hopefully be rewarded by the sight of more and more fish and other marine life flocking back to the area over time. You might not think that there's anything romantic about a pile of old rocks, but that's only because you've never been to take a look at the Kissing Rocks in California, USA. The rocks can be found in Pacific Grove, and they're a weather-beaten granite archway which reaches out above the water. The waves that crash against the shore and lap around the rocks make for a dramatic backstop. But that makes no difference to this romantic pair. They're locked in an eternal embrace, continuing to kiss no matter what happens with the weather around them. They first became a popular spot for lovers during the Victorian era, hence the many old sepia-tone photos of couples on the rocks which have survived into the modern age. It wasn't until April 1970 that they got the official name of the Kissing Rocks. But perhaps that makes sense, given that at the time America was still basking in the afterglow of the Summer of Love. In Voglia, Italy, we find the abandoned ruins of the Villa Demidov, and the dilapidation of the area seems to be causing pain and misery to its most famous occupant. This is the Apennine Colossus, forever perched on top of his stone grotto. Nature is growing through him and all around him, and all he can do is watch as what was once an ornate garden is overtaken by flora. This used to be a Renaissance garden belonging to the enormous villa built here in the 16th century by Francesco de' Medici, but the splendor didn't last for long. Despite taking 12 years to build, it was already abandoned by the early 19th century. The Grand Duke of Tuscany, Ferdinand III, eventually took pity on the property and bought it, but was so struck by the gardens that he ultimately destroyed the villa and focused on the gardens instead. Based on the expression on the face of the Apennine Colossus, we're not sure he agreed with that decision. Caño Cristales in Vista Hermosa, Colombia, has a range of different nicknames that tell you everything about how highly the locals rate its beauty. It's known as the river that runs away from paradise, the river of 5 colors, and simply the most beautiful river in the world. Even the name suggests beauty. It translates as the River of Crystals. You have to catch it at the right time of year to see what all the fuss is about. The colorful displays only occur during a narrow window between the wet and dry seasons. That's when the plants on the bed of the river turn red and interact with the water to produce streams of green, yellow, and blue. The effect lasts around 10 weeks, from September into mid-November. And during that time, people from all over the world come here in search of the perfect photograph. The environment here is so sensitive that visitors are not permitted to smoke, drink, eat, cook, or wear sunscreen in case they damage any of the plants responsible for the rainbow effect. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, and you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.